So next up in our Fast Saga, we have Fate of the Furious, sort of shown as F8 of the Furious, which is what I refer it as to, but it could just be said as Fast and Furious 8, which is it has been referred to. Technically, we still have the Fast and Furious, but I'd like to pretend we just have the Furious part still, and they've just added a new part to it to make the haha F8 funny. Regardless, this movie is probably the most superfluous of the entire franchise. Now at this point, they're really just making them in order to continue this being one of the highest grossing franchises of all time, and that's understandable. Ultimately though, it feels like stuff just kind of happens in this movie at this point because we need it to happen. It's not really any real reason for these movies to keep being made. Technically, 2 and 3 are probably more superfluous, considering that there is no reason to continue after the first one, but at least there was stuff moving forward, you know? Now let's kind of recap what's happened so far, not in terms of story, but, in terms of how the series has sort of went, you know? The original one was just sort of this general detective movie. It's basically Point Break but with cars, and it sort of has upped the stakes since then, about street racing, about crime and dealing with it and its characters. 2 didn't involve one of 2 of its main stars, and then Tokyo Drift didn't involve either of them, except one of them having a small cameo. But it was that small cameo that ultimately saved the franchise, as it had him gain interest in it, and was the reason why the real sequel that should have existed in the first place was able to fully exist. Bringing all the storylines together from the past 4, 5 was the real conclusion that it should have just been. Upping the stakes and the amount of stuff they do with it, having 5 be this whole-ass crime drama but also heist movie, ends up basically having the characters be fine by the end of it. Brian is living his life with the girl he met in the first one and now is in a relationship now married with. Dom has moved past his past and his angers, and all of them are so incredibly rich that they have no reason to ever do anything ever again. But of course, in order to bring another sequel into it, it would make sense to, hey, that character that you thought died didn't really die, because they died off screen, so thus we could again say that they didn't really die, so there you go. Having them in there made sense, fine. And if you want to continue that into a sequel, to really end this story arc of them becoming who they are again after forgetting, now remembering by the end of 7, fine. And it's just due to the unfortunate outside world things that happened, you had to sort of end Brian's arc, and having the 2 separate should have been the way to end. Now while I feel 5 should have been the ending in general, 7 is a fine enough conclusion considering what happens into it. Most characters' arcs were in 5, now they're just kind of here, and it really continues into this. This group, which together really just does what they've been doing the last couple movies, which is living their lives super rich, doing whatever the fuck they want, and just when they're on call, just by the nature of being friends, they will do whatever dangerous missions they end up feeling the need to do. Mainly, this movie also sort of answers a question I've been having, which is, why didn't they call the people who were important in the big Fast 5 mission Tico and Rico? And that's mainly because I think that though everyone that is friends with Dom is part of his family, his crew, the people that he's going to call to do the dangerous stuff, are the people he feels he can rely on the most to do this sort of thing. And though the wild cards of our 2 boys could be included and are in this one, they aren't necessarily included in all of the big spy missions that they probably, rightfully, when you think about it, wouldn't be able to handle. And again, that sort of answers my question on why they weren't called in 6, and that's because they weren't involved there, and this new crew, when Hobbs will call on them, they won't be the group that, Mr. Nobody ends up bringing in. They're, again, more like a wild card that might be used in a just-in-case backup sort of thing, in a weird, strange way that they could actually help with, rather than, helping our big, crazy spy crew. Though I'm pretty sure they will in 9, so who knows. That's where our crew is in this movie going forward. 7 basically was the ending of the arc of the Fast and Furious stuff, and going forward, we're just in a whole other thing. The main villain of this movie and except Hobbs and Shaw, whatever spin-offs will be in the future, main villain of the rest of the Fast and Furious main named movies being basically evil Illuminati, which is the rival villain against the good Illuminati that is Mr. Nobody. Basically, a villain who wants to take over the world, muhaha, like he's fucking Megatron. And considering the weird shit that happens in these movies, this series basically, at this point, if it wasn't already, definitely by this point, is a fucking Saturday morning cartoon in movie form. So living their good lives, Dom's good life is interrupted by Cypher, whom is Charlize Theron, who has this awful haircut in the beginning of the movie. In the movie in general, but especially in the beginning of the movie, sorry to say. She basically blackmails Dom to basically make him do whatever she feels like, and it does end up working out when Hobbs happens to call Dom and his crew for another job, which I'm assuming they probably did 1 or 2 after 7 before this, and then we know we'll do a couple after this before 9, but whatever. Because of Cypher, Dom ends up knocking Hobbs the fuck out and taking the big EMP thing that was needed for whatever plan Cypher's got going on. And of course he becomes an outlaw, and technically because of them, so does basically the entire crew. Because of that, Hobbs goes into the exact same jail Shaw was in, even though it was clearly a different jail before. Shaw references the exact quote from the previous movie, so it implies this is the same jail in some capacity, sure. And because of course it does, mainly because of the outside intervention of Mr. Nobody, the two end up escaping and are brought to their little group with the rest of Dom's crew. They're like, the fuck's going on? Because of this, they figure out that, of course, Cypher is in fact the reason why Owen Shaw was the way he was, and strangely may or may not be the reason why Deckard was kind of the way he is, which is meant to be like, oh, this is the reason why Deckard is actually a good guy and totally fine. Which I could kind of believe if he wasn't definitely mostly over his own volition trying to kill our main characters in the previous one. And again, as far as we knew at this time, this regarding future movies definitely did kill people, especially Han, so it's just weird throughout this movie. Even knowing about the future, this movie still is weird the whole time when we're just like, oh, he's a good guy, and he's not. Now that doesn't not make him likable. I do like him in the movie and in the next spin-off one, but he's still fucking, as far as they knew, killed Han. The fact that they're totally fine with him by the end of the movie, more or less, it's weird to me. They try to track Cypher, but Cypher ends up retracking them and basically fucks them all up, takes the God's Eye, and is able to basically keep track of them as she begins to make Dom do another mission, which is mainly just attack this governor of wherever and take his nuclear launch codes, which despite the attempted intervention of the other group, Dom's able to just do some crazy shit and get away. Fine throughout that whole scene there, Cypher did try to make a bunch of electronic cars that I guess are the self-driving newfangled type of cars and hack into them and make them slam into everything, which is, speaking of Saturday morning cartoon stuff, literally a plot from Transformers. So Dom does get away with it, and we end up finding out that, hey, now they're in Russia, so of course they end up going to Russia. The group has to sort of track him down and stop them from hijacking a big sub. They nearly are able to stop it from going and take the whatever the fuck was really needed to try and take over the world. It's whatever. And as a bunch of bad CGI cars goes and try to chase them, Dom turns out, when he escaped from them in the city, did not, as we thought, kill Deckard, but in fact faked killed him. As when he was scoping in the city, he actually had secretly met with Shaw's mother, who of course set up this whole thing, getting him with help of Tego and Rico, there they are, to be the little wild cards to quickly get him out of there with his mom. She forces Deckard to get Owen's help, and the two of them are actually able to save what of course has been the thing that has been the blackmail the whole time, which is the small young kid that he had with Elena. He totally didn't mention the fact that due to nearly fucking up that little city part, Elena was killed off, and that was actually really sad, considering I decided to really pay attention to her the last couple of movies. So was actually sad to see her go this time. The first time I watched this, I totally forgot she was a character, and I had to look her up on the wiki and go, right, the character from the last 2 movies. Helena's never really been the best character. She's never really been that interesting. It just was a... But it is interesting that the movie does decide to go, hey, you can't just get rid of the other female love interest when you have the original. That's stupid. And I do like that they use that to actively, like, put the guilt on Dom. That does put his parts of the movie to be more interesting than they really should have been. With his son now saved by the Shaws, he's able to just join our group and stop the big sub. I am not a fan of the big sub battles. A lot of the time it's just Cypher going, what if I hack into this? And then they're like, we're gonna blow it up. And that's it, the end of the big chase scene. It's probably the worst chase scene of the whole series, just due to the messy nature of the trying to mix the CGI cars with the CGI sub. With that, we get all the characters coming together for a little dinner, which includes Hobbs and Shaw. Hobbs, who is now retired because he doesn't want to do that stuff anymore, wants to spend time with family, which, understandable. And Shaw, I guess, is here because he helped save the sun, so I guess that redeems him a little bit, but not entirely, because he still killed Han. Again, as far as we knew. Tego and Rico aren't there. I don't know what they're doing right now. I think they just kind of do whatever the fuck they want. And I think Dom just knows that. he knows they are not very reliable, I guess. P.S. Pretty sure the real reason they're not in these movies is because they majorly speak Spanish, and pretty sure the producers are being like that, and they're like, but we can't have them as marketable characters if the audience can't understand them. Now, this movie is directed by F. Gary Gray, who started off his career mainly doing music videos for people like Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, TLC. He did Miss Jackson, which is really cool, and started his movie career with Friday, and has since done several movies of a similar sort, with my favorite one being Straight Outta Compton. And of course, coming on with this is his first real big action movie. And you can sort of tell in places from watching the previous ones, he clearly did his research, because there is certain things I would see Justin Lin do. He definitely took some cues from the crazy spin shot, as that actually happens a couple times in this one. But it's clear the best shots of the movie are more when it's the environmental shots, when he's sort of looking around in the city, and the actual shots of the characters themselves. It is much more cleaner and much more nicer to look at, and the action scenes, in all honesty, are probably the best of the series. I really love the whole part of the Deckards, the whole plane fight scene. That is very fun to watch. The crazy jail area fight scene is awesome. But the real problem is the driving stuff isn't as interesting. It's shot well, it's shot very well, actually. I have no real complaints about necessarily, but I really feel like Gary Gray's strengths were more on the on-foot, in-person segments than they were the actual driving stuff. Because though they are shot well, they aren't shot dramatically, and I really feel that the shaky cam, while definitely has its problems, could really be needed in certain shots. And in stuff like driving stuff and doing all of that, that is absolutely needed for stuff like Fast and the Furious. You need that, like, whoa, whole, like, reaction shots that you do get in places here, but they just feel, like, too clean, almost. And it really doesn't mix with how they show off the cars, and especially mixing with the CGI, it makes the CGI look even more apparent and even more fake. And it really should have been masked much, much better than it ends up being. And that's the reason I really don't like that big sub scene. It's not shot very naturally, it's not shot very interestingly. The CGI does look very fake in this, whether it be the cars smacking against each other, the cars following them in Antarctica, or the big sub. The CGI is very clearly the secondary idea. It's clear a lot of the budget went to hiring the big-name actors just to have them in the movie. They didn't care as much. They just wanted to just shove whatever they could on screen, I guess. Everything about all the action scenes is worsened by the editing of the movie. I feel like the way the movie's edited makes it go way too quick. It feels like scenes just go, you know, fast and furious, which, sure, okay, but that just doesn't sit well with me. I really need something that shows off the emotions of the character and them reacting to these situations. You can have it as fast as you want for the action scenes, but when they're talking with each other, I don't expect them to just talk for 5 minutes, then get shot up, and then they're talking for a very quick time. It feels like they go from shot to shot to shot to shot to scene to scene to scene real quick, and they should have just stayed for a little bit for a few of those just to get a feel about what's happening in the world and the characters. It feels like this movie goes too fast, almost. The best scenes in the movie are everything involving Dom, and unfortunately Dom isn't in the majority of the movie because they try to keep him away from the other characters, so it just feels weird. The movie begins making us think that he's going to turn bad, and the characters still think that he will, even though we know why he's being blackmailed almost immediately into the movie. It's like, I don't believe for a sec that he's going to be evil, especially after we already know that he's not going to be evil. So the fact that the movie continues to do that really makes this movie just feel like it's just not really caring about its own plot. But when it does show off Dom, it's weirdly probably some of Vin Diesel's best acting. It really feels like he almost felt like that child was his own child and was just like, don't fucking shoot him. Like, it felt really genuine this time. This is the best acting I've seen of him in this whole series. It really felt like he was trying in this movie. Jason Statham, while I don't feel should be this snarky guy considering the way he was in the previous one, is still actually pretty enjoyable. Jason Statham's just a really good action actor, and I do love to see him in movies. What I don't think is great, though, is that The Rock is also pretty snarky in this. He feels a bit different than he used to. You know, Hobbs felt like a separate character than what most of The Rock plays. And while this is definitely better than most Rock characters, he still feels like now he's just playing who The Rock is now, rather than Agent Hobbs, and that just feels unfortunate. However, the real MVP is Mama Shaw, who was very clearly made to just be a character just for this one, but because the actress loved playing this character so much, they brought her in for future movies, so I cannot wait to see more of her, because she is hilarious and the best part of this movie. Young nobody, little nobody, he felt like just he was reading off his lines. He did not feel very natural with the rest of the group. He just very clearly didn't have any chemistry at all. Ramsey had a little bit of a struggle, as I felt like she was still finding her place, which definitely had a place in there, as opposed to Little Nobody, who just didn't. And obviously his character is to be the douchey guy in the movie, but still, even after he started working with him, you felt like he was just there to be there. And that's what I definitely like about F. Gary Gray. He definitely knew, like the last one, how to get the right reactions out of his actors, and he definitely tried to work with them to actually make them try in this movie. I definitely felt some real chemistry with Hobbs and Shaw. We got some actual emotion out of Ludacris, and again, Vin Diesel was really good in this. And again, him and Michelle Rodriguez, you really do feel that they have this connection, that there is, though again I don't believe for a second that Dom will be evil in any capacity, you do feel this betrayal from The Rock and from Michelle Rodriguez, from that, you know, Vin Diesel is now suddenly evil. Even if technically, when they are in the same scene together, they're not actually, because the fucking actors are big children and don't like each other for whatever fucking reason. So yeah, every scene that they have in there was shot entirely separately. They never actually shared like an actual room together during production. It's very stupid and childish. I think at this point they've made up, but it's whatever. It really felt like there was nothing to go off on this movie. There was nothing really going into it that made it interesting, nothing about it that made it actually worth watching. Does it have some cool action scenes? Sure. Does it have characters you like? Sure. But I feel like it may have it even less than 7, due to the clean directing and camera work and better acting. And I feel maybe a better written plot due to there actually being a reason the characters are doing stuff rather than just hobbling along and finding reasons for Shaw to find them. It sort of evens out to be just as alright of a movie like how 7 was. And just like 7, I really just have to say, if you like the previous ones, that'll be the only way you'll like this one, but even then, it's probably the second weakest. Again, it's obviously going to be 2 is the worst of them, but 8, I mentioned last time that I was thinking Will I like 8 more than 7 now that I've rewatched 7 and rethought about it? And in truth, no, I'd rather rewatch 7 because 8 just has this feeling of, now we're doing this cinematic thing, we're going to do vaguely what the superhero movies do. We're going to continue this franchise to continue the franchise and make it big money. We don't care about character, we care about the action scenes, we care about the funny, snarky stuff, blah blah blah, give us your money, watch our movie. And that's what this movie feels like. It feels soulless. It feels like this movie that was just made solely to be made entirely superfluous, like I said. It's fine, it's fun, but I feel like it's less fun than the previous, also weak movie 7. I hope that the next Fast and the Furious will genuinely try more to have actual character and an actual plot. When Cypher returns with help of John Cena, who will also inevitably be turned good by the end of that movie. Just wait. When we get to that point, we'll get to it. Until then, like I said, F8, Fate of the Furious, it's fine. Not awful, but it's nothing I'd say would be worth anyone's time unless you aren't already a fan. Even then, the only reason you wouldn't want to skip this is because you might want to be seeing F9, so if you are, then see it, and see if you actually like it more than me. But of course, a movie you probably could skip if you're watching F9, regardless of the quality that we'll get to. A movie that I've not actually seen until this next review that I will be doing, which will be the spin-off movie that I'm sure will tie in later into F10 and F11, that being the spin-off movie that they decided to make after seeing the chemistry of Hobbs and Shaw, that being Hobbs and Shaw. But that'll be next time, because until then, I've been the Movie-thoner. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did and you found it informative, then go ahead and subscribe and see all the other stuff I'll be talking about into the future. But more importantly, did you like this movie more than I did, or do you feel that it's just as I felt like it was? And leave that stuff in the comments. But most importantly, stay good, stay safe, and don't be an asshole.